Hello, everybody. Can you hear me okay? I will speak. Oh, that's better. I can hear myself now. If you could take your seats. And a very big welcome to all of you to BAWP here in Humberside. I got it right. I got it right, Karen. I know. Here in Humberside. It's so fantastic to be here. It's fantastic to see so many of you. Oh, I told you I'd forget. My name's Elliot Foskett. I always forget to introduce myself. I'm Elliot Foskett. I'm the College of Policing lead for the Strategic Command course, amongst some other things. And it's amazing to be here today, but I'm not going to talk about me too much, I promise you. There's a slight change to the agenda today for reasons that we can't go into. Lynn, unfortunately, can't make it with us. But we've got the agenda as follows. It will be Chief Constable Michelle Skeer, who's the president of BAWP, will be opening it. We've got DCC Serena Kennedy, Chief Constable Andy Rhodes, Superintendent Tara McGovern, and then I'll kind of wash up with some questions as we go on. There's the app for you. For those of you who've downloaded the app, was there many people at SWIP this year? Yeah, so if you may even have the app from that anyway. So if you download the app, you can use Slido to ask questions as well, which is all really good and super whizzy. And it's going to be a very packed agenda, but one I know that you will find really informative. And I think that's just about it for the housekeeping. And just for me to say, really, that I'm not going to use the line I spoke to Nikki about at the very start, but actually, when I come to events like this, I hear people describing women in policing as inspirational. And I don't want to use that word. I want to use successful. So why do I want to use successful? Because I think this is about women in policing breaking down barriers and obstacles that are created and put in your way. The PNAC this year, Police National Assessment Centre, which gets you onto the Strategic Command course, the female candidates were a 62% pass rate. The male candidates, a 30% pass rate. So double. So I think a round of applause really for everybody who's got through that. It's amazing. And for the chief officers in the place, they know how difficult that assessment centre is. So this is the second year on the trot where we've seen an increase in female representation on the Strategic Command course. And in 2020, it will be 48% females to 52% males. Who doesn't like a 48-52% split? What could possibly be controversial about that? That's the only Brexit reference you will hear in 2 days, I promise you. So, and I'll leave you with why I think it's important to talk about success and succeeding and smashing down those barriers and those obstacles. This morning, my best friend, colleague back in Northamptonshire, you may have seen her plastered all across the news recently around the diplomatic row that's going on in Northants and Boris and Trump and everybody else. She was at 7:10 this morning, sat on the driveway in her car, wet hair, in pyjamas, doing a down-the-line interview because it was the only place where she could get peace and quiet from her 3 children and her dog and the chaos of the day. And I think you really know you've made it when you're tucking your pyjamas into your Ugg boots to do a down-the-line interview to the BBC. And she's managing all of that and actually parenting to the max. And I think that's a fantastic achievement. And that's what I'm talking about when I'm saying just succeeding and really succeeding well. So enough now from me. I'm going to hand over to Chief Constable Michelle Skeer, who's going to open the event. Can you please give her a big round of applause? Thank you.
That was Charlie's Angels. All right. I thought it was Dynasty. See, that's showing my age there, isn't it? Talking about Dynasty. And, so, yeah, see, I write my name down, so just to make sure that I remember what I'm called, so when we're at these sort of events. So yeah, good afternoon. I was going to say good morning. We've been up early. So, yes, I'm Michelle Skeer. I'm the Chief Constable of Cumbria Constabulary. Recently elected BAWP president, which I'm delighted about. And as we go through the speech, hopefully you've realised why that is a big, big honour for me. I'm also the national lead for sex offenders and violent offenders, so it's quite nice to be at something where I'm not talking about sex offenders, which is good. If you want to talk to me in private about sex offenders, that's absolutely fine. I've been doing it for about 10 years. So I've nearly 30 years experience as a police officer. I've got 30 years in February next year, and I've been 10 years as a chief officer. And I probably come into being a chief officer just as all the money exited. So I did the SEC in 2008, got a chief officer's job in 2009 when we finished. So I think it's fair to say, and all of you have been in policing will know that it's been a fairly challenging 10 years. But during that time, as a police officer in those 30 years, as you would expect, I've had to deal with a series of firsts and actually pushing some of the boundaries, and especially joining policing in 1990. Yes, I know I don't look that old, but yes, I did. I joined in 1990. And I went into the CID probably quite early on in service. I had about 2.5, 3 year service. And at that time, CID was very male-dominated, specialist area. And yeah, it did feel a little bit like life on Mars, which we'll maybe touch on as we go through today. But it's because of those experiences in that 30-year service why I'm really passionate about fairness and about being able to balance a career with a family, because I've got 3 children, which you'll hear about. And it shouldn't be either or, but it should be about choice. And that's what I've always firmly believed and tried to make it easier for others that have followed. So if I can get this to work, we'll move it on. So because it's a conference, you've always got to have a few quotes in there, haven't you? So you'll be able to see that I've doctored this quote. So coming from 1910, it's obvious that they would only be talking about men in 1910. But the reason why this quote, I think, is really, really good is because actually it talks about pushing forward and actually striving. And actually sometimes it works out for you, sometimes it doesn't work out for you. But if you play it safe, I would suggest that you don't actually get anything. And I've tried not to play it safe during my career, and I think I've had a great, I thoroughly enjoy policing, still thoroughly enjoy policing. It's a great job. But it's because sometimes you've just got to push those boundaries. And if somebody says no, you ask why, and you try and work around it. And there's lots of you in this room that are first, and it'll resonate with some of you as I'm speaking. So, back to the beginning then. So I thought I'd tell you a little bit about me. That's a map of Cumbria, for someone wonder what's that random map. What's the random map on the screen? Beautiful county, but I was brought up in Cumbria. And I would say my background was pretty ordinary. 2 parents at home, 2 younger brothers that I bossed about. Probably still do, to be fair. I'm still the bossy older sister. Brought up in Carlisle. And I wouldn't say I was a grade A student. I wasn't a high flyer or anything like that. But I was very competitive and actually tried really hard. And I was the first of my family to go to university. And that's probably come through in some of the speeches that we'll hear today. And that was a biggie for my family. So I went off to Leeds, and Leeds University, and did a history and media degree, because at that time I sadly thought I wanted to be a journalist, not upsetting any journalists in the room, but I thought I wanted to be a journalist. I did combine the media with history. But you'll see Crime Watch UK on the slide there. And it was probably when I was doing an attachment, because I did a 4-year degree, partied probably for 3 years and did a little bit of work in the last year. But it was whilst I was doing that Crime Watch attachment, because I did about 3 or 4 work placements as part of the degree, that I thought, actually, this policing malarkey looks like a really challenging, good career. And actually ditched the idea of being a journalist, because I decided they were too cutthroat, and wanted to join policing. And I joined in 1990 as an ordinary entrant, because at that time we used to run, it was sort of the graduate entry graduate entry or normal entry, and I came in on the normal entry. And I would say my initial appointment was definitely a bit rocky. Because I was a bit of a bolshy 22-year-old at that time. Coming to policing, thought it seemed a little bit staid, a little bit sort of stuck in a time warp. And the interview panel had repeatedly asked me about why I was joining policing because I had a degree. So at the end of the interview, I asked them if they had a problem with people that were educated and had a degree, which didn't go down well, as you can imagine. There was a superintendent in the room. The only person that found it funny was that there was a Federation rep who was just about wetting himself, I think, on the end of and then trying to cover it up from the superintendent. And so when I got called back in, because it was in the days where you'd done an assessment centre, well, certainly we did in Cumbria. It was a weekend assessment centre, and the interview, I didn't realise this, but the interview was almost a bit of a rubber stamp that you were in. So before I'd gone in, I'd gone in, done the interview, was out in 15 minutes, so I didn't think that was a particularly good sign. So I said to the training sergeant, I've really blown that. I've not got that. And of course, he knew that I should be through because he'd obviously done the assessment centre. He said, oh no, you'll be fine, you'll be fine. So anyways, I went back into the room after about 10, 15 minutes, and there were 3 brothers Grimm in front of the interview panel. And I thought, well, I know what the result of this is going to be. Anyways, they said, well, you'll be pleased to know, Miss Irving. They didn't look very pleased at all. You'll be pleased to know, Miss Irving, that we're actually going to offer you a position in Cumbria Constabulary. But can I just reiterate that we have not got a problem with people that are educated? So I think I made my mark early on. I'm trying to see what's in my personal file, because of course you can't get to see your personal file, can you, until you actually retire, just to see if they've actually got me as that bullshit 22-year-old then. So I think, if I was honest, in the early days, did I think I'd made the right choice? Was it for me? And as I said earlier, coming in at 22, been to university, you think you know everything, don't you, at that age? I've got a 19-year-old now that actually definitely thinks he knows it all. It was quite old-fashioned. It wasn't as exciting as Crime Watch, but I mean, that could be because I was posted to Whitehaven, which is lovely, in case there's anybody from Whitehaven here, but it's actually in the middle of nowhere, and there's not a lot happens in Whitehaven. So it certainly wasn't as the sort of the exciting that was portrayed on Crime Watch, but within a very quick period of time, as I say, within probably doing those initial attachments to the CID unit, I knew I'd found my niche. And I think that's the beauty of policing. Wherever is your bag, whether it's Firearms World, whether it's CID, whether it's uniform policing, neighbourhood policing, there's something for everybody. So I knew that I'd found the bit where I wanted to be. And I became a detective constable out in Workington, and very quickly was offered a detective sergeant temporary position. And again, this was probably a big moment in the sense I knew it was going to be really unpopular because I was the new girl on the block, as it were. Only had 6 months on the CID, and I was here in a temporary detective sergeant position. But I did that sort of, when you take a deep breath and think, no, I'm actually going to do this, and actually combine the love of CID with management, and actually that office, which at the time was made up of very hard and long in service male detectives, became actually my biggest supporters. So sometimes perceptions can be deceptive, and actually that's been a valuable lesson that I've kept with me as well going forward. So you recognise this is what you see in most police forces, but I became a DI up at Carlisle, and loved it. Dealing with, the run-of-the-mill violence, drugs, all that type of high-end CID work, and just loved being involved in running major crime ops. And shortly after being there, probably about 12 months, I was encouraged by my DCI, a male colleague, to say, actually, we've got promotion boards coming up, and I think you should go for one. And I thought, no, I've only been a detective inspector. How many times do we stop ourselves from actually going for that job or going for that promotion or that sideways move because actually we think we haven't been there long enough? And I said, oh, no, it was almost, yeah, but. And he said, no, I think you should go for it. And I did, and got chief inspector. And as part of that process, then the DCC used to write out to everybody that had been successful at the promotion board and say, what job would you like in the force? What would you like to be considered for? And I said, I want to stay in the TPA. I don't want to go to headquarters. I want to stay very operational. So you can guess what I got. I got headquarters. And so that's our headquarters up at Penrith. And actually that was probably a really shrewd move from the chief officer team at that time because they'd looked at my background where I'd been, and actually I'd been in the TPO the whole of my career working on very operational teams, and they decided to bring me into sort of HQ so I could get that broader perspective, and it definitely served a really, really good purpose. But whilst I was at HQ, it became sort of another first for the organisation. So they'd had a first of, as a detective sergeant, being in an office where you didn't do any part-time working because it was specialist at that time and it was only uniform policing that offered part-time working. I managed to negotiate that, got that in place. Came to be as DCI, and I went and told my line manager that I was pregnant with my second child. And he sort of exclaimed and said, but we haven't had a chief inspector pregnant before. And so I was a bit surprised, and I said, well, it's probably just as well because all the other DCIs are male. He then made it worse by sort of saying, and did you know that you were pregnant when you went for the promotion board? So I don't know how long he thought people were pregnant for, but I'd had the promotion board sort of 12 months before, so I wasn't quite sure where he was going on with that one. And so I suppose, you know, some of those experiences made me very, very passionate. And actually I've had much more positive and good experiences than bad experiences. But actually to make it better for those colleagues that are following us, because it's all our responsibility. And I would say to the people in the room as well, it's our responsibility to actually make it better for colleagues following both male and female. And when I was DCI, after I came back and had my son, I think it was guilt putting, you know, I didn't ask the organisation then if I could come back in a part-time capacity, and I probably should have done, but I felt, no, maybe I shouldn't. I'm a DCI, maybe I should go back. And I think sometimes we should challenge ourselves at a senior level as well in terms of actually getting that balance and asking and pushing some of the boundaries. So I've been at HQ, quite happy. And I got called in on a Friday afternoon and asked to go into an area, and you'll all have this when you've had a bad inspection of sorts. And this was back in 2005, and we'd had massive flooding in the county. Cumbria always floods. That's why it's so pretty, but it does flood an awful lot. And I'd personally been flooded from my own house at home. So I was living with my husband, 2 kids, in a room at my mum and dad's house, which is not really conducive for happy relations, shall we say. We'd lost the main police station at Carlisle, so we were all in temporary accommodation, and I kid you not, we had 2 or 3 computers between the whole of the policing in Carlisle, and then wondered why performance perhaps wasn't as it should be. So I went in there as a sort of a new management team from that Monday, and had to really, really push forward because the tanker's on there, because it did feel a bit like there was a tanker going in the wrong direction. New management team in there, how do we actually turn this around? And I would say that probably my style at this time, because I do think that reflecting back on my career, sometimes you have to do very different styles of management. And at this time, because we had 3 months to actually turn it round, it was probably very, very focused and very sort of hard in respect of style. But we actually managed to get it turned around and signed off. Probably the week I had my 3rd child. Oh, Molly, please know there's no more children. That's the last one. I only had 3. But it was that wanting to get it finished before I actually went off on maternity leave. And you're probably going to think I'm mad now, but a week later, after I'd had my 3rd child, I actually did a promotion board for superintendent. And I did that because actually I felt this is an opportunity and this is sort of my time. And I was successful at that promotion board, but I thought it said something about the organisation because it actually moved on massively. And the fact that I just had a baby and was on maternity leave didn't come into the equation. And they were quite happy for me to take up that posting when I was ready to come back after maternity leave as superintendent, which I thought was really, really good in the way it should be. So I was a chief super within sort of 12 months, and then I went for, we've talked about PNAC, I went that joyous experience of PNAC, and got through first time as a detective, And again, that was a bit of a first then in 2008. There wasn't a lot of people that had just had one, sort of, I suppose, single track career in terms of being a detective or being whole uniform. And there was a lot of thought at that time. Well, there's lots of myths that put out there, isn't there, in terms of, actually, you've got to be an area commander, you've got to be this, you've got to be that. Actually, I went with detective experience and got through and got promoted within Cumbria as the ACC. Became the DEP in 2014, and then lucky enough to become the Chief Constable, and it's a great honour to be Chief Constable in my home county, in my force that I've been there from a PC right the way through to Chief Constable. So 2018 became Chief, so nearly sort of 2 years. And as I said, there's been lots and lots of challenges in that time, and we'll maybe touch on some of them when we get into questions. So I love this. I love this quote. So, and I really sort of do believe that. I think, as women, we are really, really strong. And actually we know when somebody's in hot water, actually how strong we are sometimes. So it's a brilliant, brilliant quote. So, moving on then to BAWP. So what is BAWP? And sometimes I get asked this. But actually, BAWP was founded in 1987. And we've got the lady on the front table here that actually was instrumental in that. So, and that was following on from an IAWP conference. And Tina Martin, who was a constable in Derbyshire at that time, seen this and came back and thought, actually, this is something we should have to actually help female colleagues actually come through. And the BAWP, the aims of BAWP way back when was all about raising awareness and understanding the issues that are affecting women in police service, to build on those discussions, look at it from the female perspective, and actually develop that professional network of officers, both nationally and internationally, to contribute to the professional development of members. And as I've already said, so I feel really, really privileged that I've been asked to take on the BAWP president role, especially I follow some great chiefs such as Dee Collins and Cressida Dick, just to name a couple, people that have been really passionate in actually moving some of these issues forward. In 2015, we celebrated 100 years women in policing, and there's more to do to continue to recognise women in this world, but certainly in the specialist fields and some specialist fields. So, and I'll touch on firearms, that actually we're still very much underrepresented. But Serena's going to talk a little bit more on that, so I'm not going to steal her thunder. So Gender Agenda was launched, and we looked at Gender Agenda 1, Gender Agenda 2, and then we looked at Gender Agenda 3 in 2014. And, from how it had moved on massively between doing 1, 2 and 3 was actually gender was no longer a barrier of people coming in and joining the service, but it's actually how they progress through the service and looking at those retention issues in terms of actually people leaving the service mid-service, and actually what is all that about, and actually do we understand it properly. And it's certainly something I want to progress in this role as BAWP. Because I'll just give you some stats to show that although we've made progress, we're still not there. So female colleagues make 30% of officer workforce nationally. My force is currently sitting at about 41%. I think we're either the highest or one of the highest in the country. But female officers in certain specialist fields remain low, so 6.5% nationally in firearms. So what is that about? What do we know? What do we understand about that? Female officers at a senior level remains low. Female chief constables, we're still in single figures. And we went down to, I think it was 3 a couple of months ago. We're back up to 5, but actually it's always been in single figures. So what is stopping our colleagues? I'm not saying everybody wants to be a chief constable, but what is stopping our colleagues actually coming through? And if you look at wider diversity, actually it's even worse. Police staff equal pay with male colleagues? Probably not. And again, Serena's going to touch a bit on that. So retention and progression has to be the focus, or one of the focus of BAWP going forward, and understanding what are the barriers now. So what are the real issues that are impacting in your everyday working lives, and what can we do as BAWP, but also WCON, and lots of you've all got staff networks out there. How do we bring it all together and actually move some of those issues forward? So we need you to tell us and get involved with BAWP to make that difference for the future and for colleagues that are following us. Okay, so moving forward then. I could go on, but today and tonight is all about you and celebrating the great things that women do. And it is fantastic to see the quality of the awards being presented this evening, and you should all be immensely proud of the achievements. And some of the awards, we've got Bravery, we've got Coaching and Mentoring, Community Service Award, Excellence in Performance, the Inspirational Award, Leadership, Lifetime Achievement, Officer Police Staff, Police Volunteer Member of the Year, and Special Recognition, all of which epitomise the dedication and commitment that you give to the police service day in, day out. And we have to, and we'll talk about much more about that tonight, but it's just to give you a flavour of what we're here for. I'd also like to, this gives me a chance to give some thank yous as well before I hand on to the next speaker. But I'd just like to thank the committee members for the really hard work in bringing this event together. I can't tell you how difficult it's been this year. Not because they've changed president, I'll just get that in. But we've had some ICT issues, which some of you will be aware of. So they have actually worked, no joking apart, they have worked really, really hard to actually make this a really good event for yourselves, both today, tonight and tomorrow. I'd also like to say a big thank you to all of our sponsors, and we've got some fantastic support. And without their generosity, we couldn't make events like this happen, and they're really, really important. And especially KBR, who's our main sponsor, but as I say, we've got some great sponsorship from a number, which is fabulous. So just to sort of, I suppose, finish, what I would say is it is a great time for policing. You know, the government has pledged an extra 20,000 officers, and this is an opportunity, should be an opportunity to actually increase diversity. And we need to watch that and be really careful, because actually we're having to bring, all forces are having to bring officers in very, very quickly, and we just need to have diversity at the forefront of our minds to make sure that works properly. But we need new members as well, and I would ask you to actively encourage your colleagues to join BAWP, and any of you in the room that's not members, please join up and actually help us to help you and actually move some of the issues forward. We definitely need to continue to build on the whole mentoring, coaching, and actually build confidence in our female staff. And, you know, within my force, I've got a number of female colleagues in senior positions, but I need more. And even though I've got 41% of female officers, I've still got really low numbers in certain specialist posts, and actually understanding that and how do we unblock that. So we have delivered some great things, you know, in terms of uniform, menopause awareness, paternity, maternity leave, flexible working, coaching, mentoring, lots and lots of other things. So in essence, I would say we have come a long way since 1990, but there's also much room for improvement. So I'm hoping to drive some of those improvements as this next president. So thank you very much. And I think I've got it on time. So, thank you.